Hello and welcome to Ignore All Previous Instructions. I'm Pam and I'm here today with Georgia. Georgia, would you introduce yourself a little bit to the show?
Yeah, I'm Georgia Iacovou. I'm a tech policy writer. Currently, I'm working with Computer Says Maybe, which is a public interest firm, I suppose, that works with other organizations to help them with issues of like tech and society. And they also run a media training program called the New Protagonist Network, which is essentially like media training up professionals who are working within AI who aren't white businessmen.
Hmm. And you seem to have an accent. From where are you tuning in? Or what is your geography?
My geography is London, comma UK.
Indeed. I think
I could
that'll
say the same of you.
makes
You
it.
have an accent too. Guess we all
Do
have
I?
accents.
Yeah, well, everyone has
That's
an
crazy.
accent, it's true. Except one person in Indiana or something. The theoretically neutral American accent.
True neutral.
And yeah, it was true neutral in the center of the square.
Center of the grid.
Yeah. So something you and I were talking about in the pre-show, and I thought that'd be fun for us to jump off of. We were talking about because I'm interested in tech policy spaces, but coming from the perspective of a builder and talking, and I'm interested in asking you about, the kind of people that you see in tech policy spaces. Because when I look at, one of the reasons why we got in touch is I had this rabbit hole of I was looking at Tech Policy Press, and then that led me to Computer Says Maybe, and then I was literally looking at the bios of people and kind of following rabbit holes, and then you were like, compliments, the coolest person I saw. So, a uh, and so we're, what's your experience of being in these spaces, or the kind of people you're seeing in them?
This is actually quite a hard question to answer. I think because, sorry, I know I went on a whole spiel before, but we weren't recording, so it felt a bit like.
So it's
But I think
different
like,
pressure.
yeah, because I also don't want to drag anyone that I work with or have worked with, which is like I'm
You
never
need
doing
you need
that. I
no
don't.
names. Yeah, like
No, no,
you
no.
were
But I
just
think also, yeah, yeah. I think
you
there's
go to a
like
panel and who's there.
no, yeah, it's a good point. I think lots of okay, I will say interestingly, lots of the people that I like maybe don't interact with directly, but lots of people you hear on podcasts like this one, or lots of people that you like read the work of, or lots of people that like you like that we've interviewed in our podcast, like Computer Says Maybe podcast, is like there'll be journalists, right? So by
Hmm.
definition, they're not builders, and they're also not even
Hmm.
like I don't know, they don't like work in the civic tech space so much as that they like are essentially
There's
doing like
supposed to be like, I guess, objective,
yeah,
like gathering the things and relaying them, which is a valuable thing to do.
yeah, exactly. And they I think the interesting thing about like journalists who are covering like issues of like technology rather than just like reviewing headphones or whatever are like by definition have to do like investigative work because like these like technological systems are often really opaque, and I
Mm.
think it's hard to get like a viewpoint from people who aren't builders from the outside. Do you know what I mean? And I think that as in like people who are not like people like you who are working on products and who like know like intimately many aspects
How
of
things
like the
get
way that
built.
yeah, how things get built generally, and also just
Yeah.
like the way they're put together. I think like when you do like it's like when you do the kind of work that I do, I'm not even a journalist, but like when you do the kind of work that I do where I'm like doing research on behalf of other people or like for myself so that I can produce good writing for like my audience, I am like going out there and I'm talking to people and I'm asking questions like like I just recently like did like a uh project for the Wellcome Trust, and it's like I don't know like a great, or I didn't before, I didn't know a great deal about the way it was about like it was an internal report about the way like open source science software like is funded and the way that people make build it. I obviously don't have any experience with that, but I have enough like domain expertise to like piece together the stories and to understand like what are the problems that these people are facing, and like what are they like, why is it so hard to like get like software that is essentially like infrastructure, like dependencies and things, like why is it
Yeah.
so hard to
It's
like get
very, very
money?
important.
Yeah, exactly. And like these things have like maintainers that are like, whatever. They're just, it's like that like XKCD like comic. It's
I
like
was
they
gonna
have.
say, if you know the joke about like, yeah, that like all the PHP things are, based on some guy in
Yeah,
Missouri who's been
yeah,
unpaid for 40 years. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there was that one. Who was it? Recently, there was like a package or dependency of some kind that got like completely obliterated because the guy was like socially engineered over the course of 2 years because he was too exhausted to like continually maintain it.
The thing is,
And
like, yeah,
he,
when you started that way, I was just like, which one? But I
yeah,
mean, that one sounds pretty interesting. I'd be interested in following that story.
yeah.
So
And I think we've gone off piece a bit here, but I think like to answer your question about like what kinds of people am I seeing in uh like tech policy spaces, often it's like I think there are journalists, but then there are also people who are like just self-proclaimed ethicists. So like these are people who are
yes, this is
thinking
what I
deep.
find interesting. Is
Yeah.
like, can it be me? Can I just like start calling myself something? I think that's how it works. Cause yeah, when I was on that like bio hunt thing, that's what I do. Like it's like I'm like, okay, so what backgrounds do they have? What qualifies them to be in this space? This is a perhaps toxic hobby I have in general. Like I'm like, someone recommends a book that's about a
Mhm.
topic, and I'm like, okay, what qualifies this person to write on this topic? And then I go into like on anything. Like I have like some beef with like a career book about this because I went into like, like as I read her book and then I was like, wait, who is this person? Because a friend recommended the
Yeah.
book. And then after I
Yeah.
read the book and figured out that she was just a internet grifter,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he was like, "Oh yeah, I didn't actually read it. I just I was like, then
I
why'd
just
you
told
recommend
you
it,
to read
bro?"
it.
Yeah, like because then when I read it, like her bio
That's
is just
so
like,
fucked up.
I used to have a job and then I didn't have a job and then people kept asking me career advice and then I became a career expert and I was like,
Yeah, it's like that isn't career advice. Your job
that
is
that
being a career expert.
like you didn't, yeah, what made you in any shape? Anyway, I
Yeah.
also realized as you were telling the story, I was like, oh, now I remember who hurt me in this in this space when you say about like, so the thing that you said that I take some
Yeah.
issue with, that's like
Yeah.
who hurt Pam is when like in order to write about these things they have to know a little bit about them.
Hmm.
I actually completely disagree.
Well, I
From
mean,
my experience in terms of who hurt me is that, so in my past I spent a whole 6 months in investigative journalism, um
ooh.
at a which I don't have a problem dragging things. It's my show. So so feel free. I watched Steel Magnolias, the movie, last night, and there's like the line in it, where they say, if you can't say anything nice, come sit next to me. So I built it up. It's not even that bad. So I went to an investigative journalism conference and I was so horrified because I watched, it was like a session on like, I think literally the title of the session was in the neighborhood of statistical analysis for investigative journalists. And they
Hmm.
opened up one of the SPAS, one of the like statistical softwares,
Hmm.
and they're these are the people giving the talk. And they pull up the software and they say, okay, now I've loaded this data set. And then I go and I hit the drop down of statistical models and I just click one until it looks interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
And
God.
I was like, so like anyway, like I'm not even good at statistics, but
Yeah, yeah,
telling like basically getting on stage and telling me that you're telling a room full of 70 journalists that have come to learn how to do the investigative journalism, that you
yeah,
can arbitrarily apply a statistical model to data and then present that, and that there's not even the thought of an ethical problem with what you just described,
yeah.
or
I
like
think,
that it being irresponsible. And
yeah. I mean,
this is many years ago. So this is like
yeah. I
10
don't
years
know
ago.
how, what to like.
You don't have to
It's
defend
interesting.
this random stranger.
No, I'm not. I think that like I don't know where. I mean, I don't know anything about like what
Right.
the ethics, what the ethic like the ethical like what the official like line is for like this is how you do like ethical journalism. Like I don't actually know what that is, but I have like a rough idea of like, well, obviously that's not cool, and
Insert
this is.
ethics in game journalism joke. Anyway, it was
And
right
I
there.
I think
Yeah.
I think like especially 10 years ago, actually, interestingly. This is what I mean when there's all these intersecting problems that like mean that journalists will, if you think about 10 years ago, it was 2014, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's maths. And
You're
you,
qualified to write about technology.
there we go. This was like I guess like the peak height of like Facebook and Twitter really like delivering on like site traffic for like new media publishers,
Yes.
right? So I think that like
Hmm.
there was horrific pressure to always produce a story. I mean,
Yeah.
there probably was already, right? I don't know like heaps
Which
about
in
legacy
investigative
media.
journalism, which is like longer cycles, is
Yeah,
a really antagonist to that process.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think especially with like new media where it's like, I don't know if you look at like TechCrunch or whatever, they're like publishing God knows how many a day, like just so
Yeah.
much, right? They're pushing out so
The
much
content
content.
mill.
They have
Hmm.
to like tell us exactly like what Taylor Swift or Chappell Roan are doing at every given moment. They have to like invent like so much like
Yeah.
frankly
Which is
bullshit
all,
that
none
isn't.
of this is new. Like it's
It's
just
not new,
faster.
exactly. It was just more, exactly. So it's like
Yeah.
I think that the kind of like I got to find a story, I have a deadline, that has been like, especially in like the mid 2010s, like was at times a million. I
Yeah.
think it's like less of an issue now. Well, it's probably still an issue, but it's like less obvious because I think like
Now there's daddy
they,
algorithm.
yeah, and there's like social media platforms have made like an intentional business decision to like downgrade like anything that's
Deep
sharing a
right. Yeah.
news link,
Yeah.
deprioritize, that's it. Yeah, so I think that like it really doesn't surprise me that like at a conference they're just like find the stat graph that looks the most interesting, and
Make the
there
chart
you
that
have.
makes the image that no, yeah, that's totally I think you're totally right there.
But it
That's the
sucks.
motivation of how we got there. Yeah, it does
Yeah,
suck, but it's like
yeah,
you
yeah,
can understand the motivation that led to that, you know,
yeah,
that
absolutely.
behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially when you're like a new media publication that's like not only relying on like you're like relying on like, you know 3 to 4 places to deliver the traffic, and then you have to make sure people stay there long enough for like ad revenue, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, so it's all a big mess.
One of my favorite talks, evergreen favorites in technology for compute in the computer side is we made a mess of things, and then it's on that vein, but it's at a it's on the complexity of systems, which I think is just generally
Hmm.
I'd be interested in if drop it into it with a non-computer person and how interesting they find it. But it's like that the contemporary computer, there is actually mathematically, if you do the math on it, so much going into the making of a computer now, or even let's say your little pocket computer, your telephone, and
Hmm.
that what like a person cannot hold all of the information on it at a single time. Like just not like there's just you just have to abstract things away. It's like we are in the abstraction zone. Like if you
You
want to
mean
build
like,
a like I can't understand like the memory to the graphics to the all of the system to the networking, like everything involved in a contemporary computer. The system has gotten so complex that it's actually impossible for an individual to hold the entire system in their head.
oh yeah, right, like we use our laptops and phones all the time, but we don't know how they actually work.
Correct. And that's actually impossible for you to really know like 100% how it works. At some point you have to just be like, that's the part I don't care about. Or
Yeah.
like that's the part that I trust, that programmer in Iowa to have written a library
Yeah,
that works.
I think I think you're right, we're at like a, well, I think we're like a mad level of abstraction away from that now, and I think it's like only getting more and more abstract as we
Yeah.
delve
What do you think
further
about like the
into it.
right to repair?
Oh, the right to repair. Yeah, right. This is the
It's a
thing
do
where
you
it's
call it the
just
same
like,
thing over
yeah,
there on the other side of the ocean?
I actually feel like I should like know this. Do we have an equivalent here?
I'm not trying to quiz
Probably.
you.
Yeah, I know.
The right to repair being
But I
like,
was just thinking like,
like
I don't know
the
if we.
no user serviceable parts label. Like it's
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the opposite of right to repair is like that I should have the right to take apart something and
That I
fix
own.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think about this and things that are adjacent to this like a lot, because I think there's an issue like with even beyond like farmers who just want to be able to like fix their tractors or
Yeah.
whatever. Like,
That's the
yeah,
big. thing. Is
That's the
like,
big
yeah,
thing. And like beyond like people wanting to do that, and even beyond like people just wanting to replace the battery in their like
yeah, in their little
Mac
computer phone. Yeah, or in their,
or
yeah,
in
yeah,
anything that has a battery, I think yes,
yeah.
for the love of God, we should be able to do that.
Change a battery. Yeah,
Change a battery,
and not create waste.
especially exactly. And I think that there's like a couple of things I'd like to touch on here actually. The clear, I mean, especially if you look at Apple, like the planned obsolescence thing is like obviously a big part of like why they'd push back against a right to repair bill,
Yeah,
or whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
And you know, you can't even like we have them in our ears right now. These are like literal pre-trash. I mean, you can't even extract
They there's,
the
yeah.
once they like
You
die,
you
as in
lose
they
you or you lose one. Like you
yeah,
just,
you lose one, then it's unusable. They're like
yeah.
invisibly tethered to each other in this really annoying way. And if you
Mhm.
like if they run out of like juice or whatever, like, oh, my AirPods are broken, I need to get new ones, like they just stop working for whatever. I don't know what the shelf life
Yep.
is, probably not very long.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, even
you
even
can't you
even
can't
years is
even
not that long. Like if
yeah,
like a
exactly.
shirt can still like a shirt can last like 60 years. It's like, okay, so we, yeah, technology is not outlasting shirts.
Yeah, God, exactly. And like you when you throw them away, you can't even like there's no viable recycling process for AirPods specifically. I don't know about other things. Like you can't extract the battery and then like the
I don't
rare
know.
earth minerals that are inside of these things without destroying them because it will they will explode when you try and extract them.
Oh,
So
fun.
yeah,
That's a fun
that
Mythbusters episode.
so they're just like filling up landfills, I guess. Like I don't know. It's like, you know, they become useless. You can't even like
Yeah.
recycle them in a meaningful way. It's like they're just so gross. We should be disgusted at ourselves that they're in our ears,
Right.
but they're so convenient. And I think
They're so convenient. Yes.
the other part to this is the kind of like this is something that Cory Doctorow writes about a lot.
He
The
writes a
kind
lot generally.
I actually can't believe how prolific he is, or how much time he has to write a 15-minute
He's
read every day.
got a situation. Anyway, you were about to say something.
Yeah, he has a situation. He talks a lot about like the way that like I think I mean he doesn't put it exactly like this, but for me it's kind of like the way we are not quite seeing how our hardware is being like hijacked by software. And by that I
Mm.
mean if you have the one example he goes back to a lot, which is quite a relatable one, is the printer ink thing, the HP printer ink.
Ooh, well, this was a news thing recently. Is like that it's cracked. That it's jailbroken. Oh, is this news? Oh, this is
Oh,
good news.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
good. Yeah.
someone, yeah, this is like kind of recent news, is that someone like jailbroke, or like the means by which you can break the software and stuff about your printer things. Because that's, I mean, this is also a consequence, though. I don't know. This could be, who knows? Maybe we're tricking ourselves into a positive thing. If the softwareification of everything also means that I can break it.
You can hack it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
like congrats.
it's a both positive and a negative, I guess. I mean, there is like a kind of like, do we really need to add more things to the global IoT network so that like you know
The Internet of Crap. Yeah.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
all the smart devices in my home can be used in a botnet to
In
like
a botnet.
somehow
Yeah.
attack like attack other people or me. I don't know. Attacked by your
Sure.
own kettle. Who knows?
Yeah.
And but I think that like the printer ink thing is like the thing about that is it's like they've that it's not even clear that a printer should have software, and in fact a printer itself, sorry, shouldn't have software. For me it should just be like a peripheral that old people use because they don't realize that you can put your boarding pass on your phone now, right? But I think that like what it does is like it's not only the software and the hardware and the interplay, it's like how they use obscure laws to
Mm.
make like printer ink go up in price such that it is like more valuable than gold or whatever, because like you can't use third party printer ink in a HP printer. They take your like you know credit card information so that they charge you every time they think it's low, and like you don't actually own the HP printer, you're just like licensing it from the company. So it's like very like all this stuff like enables lots of like user hostile practices basically is what I'm saying. And I think that like right to repair like overlaps with that. It's in like, not only do I not have the right to repair, I don't even have the right to say that I own my own printer,
That's where
right?
I was. That's exactly where I was going in my little brain, was thinking about if there's a word for this or we come up with a way to talk about this, but the ownership itself is fraught with issues. But like I'm thinking about, I'm like, wow, if people are just gradually not able to own anything and that they must rent everything, then who are they renting it from? And so then that, leads to that natural question of, because so in the US there's a lot of rental housing is owned by these corporations that buy up whole housing developments, especially particularly in the Sun Belt. So like Tennessee, Georgia, this is a large migration. And
Mm-hmm.
they own these rental communities, and then the people who live in them, because like they're trapped in the rent cycle and are unable to save, are unlikely to possibly ever be able to own a home. And like the dream in America, we have, the dream of the American homeowner. So thinking about, do we dare to dream of owning a printer? Do we
Yeah.
dare? Oh, do you ever own, like, you can still own a car, but it's an asset that depreciates rapidly. You can
Yeah. And
own you can own things that are, they're where the value decreases real fast. You're allowed to own those.
I also am like, yeah, exactly. You're allowed to own something that you will replace in a year. I
Yeah,
think
you can own
like,
your AirPods. You
yeah.
don't have to lease the AirPods.
I also think that like, it's funny you mentioned the car thing because like, I think Corey also wrote about like when writing about
Of
this
course
whole
he
like,
did.
of course he did. When writing about this whole like frustration with kind of like the hijacking of like physical objects via software, he was talking about like how these like
Cars.
software, yeah, like software enabled cars. I actually can't remember the name of the brand, but they went out of business anyway. Like, so people's cars are just like
Oh, they bricked.
literally bricked and
Yeah.
they're just sitting in people's
Yeah.
driveways.
And it's
Similarly, and
it's also
perhaps
and it's
more,
illegal to reverse engineer a car. Like that's a
yeah.
thing. It's
I
anyway, you were
think
about to say something.
something else he also writes about is I can also share some of my own opinions, not just Corey's, but I feel like it's related. It's like the with Audible, like for instance, like Audible is one thing, but like many
Yeah.
streaming services, you're not allowed to actually, because of like some kind of like digital rights management,
DRM. Yeah. Put it on your
DRM,
machine.
that's it.
Yeah.
You're not actually allowed to like, I've paid to listen to this audio file, but I can only listen to it in the exact ways that you prescribe. Like I can't download it and listen to it on any other device. I think
I
is
have
like,
such an issue with DRM. Yeah. It's like
exactly.
if I
It
own
makes it
it,
illegal for
I
you to
don't
do
actually
that.
own it. You're leasing it to me.
It's like when you buy, like in the olden days when you would like buy music on iTunes, or like even now, I mean it's even less tangible now, but it's like at least you would like
Yeah.
buy music on iTunes and download
You
it
can then download
physically.
it. And you
But
can't
if
you can
you
still, this is, yeah, still
you
exists.
can still, but if you
Yeah.
like, you are actually don't own it, you just like are licensed to be like, allowed to listen to it. Like
To stream it.
technically if you
Yeah. If you buy
die,
tracks on, yeah.
no one is allowed to actually listen to your music library by
Oh,
law. Yeah, because
I didn't know
the
that
license
one.
belongs to you. You're like buying.
And the license doesn't transfer upon death?
No,
Huh.
not even upon death. Crazy.
Wow.
I think another like more dystopian example of this is the company. Oh, I forgot what they called, but they sold like essentially software enabled retina implants, and then they got
Oh,
bought by another company, and then they went obsolete in people's heads, and people stopped being able to see again.
yeah.
Dark.
The
Truly the
dark stuff.
darkest timeline.
Yeah. It makes it, yeah, there's like the Reddit subreddit, like boring dystopia. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, things like that. So what are some of your own opinions, George? what's a what's a spicy take you've had
Okay, well,
recently?
I mean, this isn't spicy, but I mean, you did mention in our chat you wanted to talk about like the election.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like we've warmed up a bit, shall we? So yeah, so when at this time of recording, the US election was a little over a week ago. The election was called about a week ago from when we're
Mm.
recording. And but yeah, Georgia and I have been watching I like someone called them autopsies, like the Democratic, like what went wrong?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's why you
The
call them autopsies.
That's
That
why I
makes
call them
sense.
autopsies.
Yeah,
The like,
bro.
what went wrong? How could this
Let's try and
happen?
figure it out
Let's
by
try. And I'm just like,
rehashing.
yeah,
Guys.
I did, to set a little bit of the scene of. where my mental state was when the US election happened. I did personally myself so much prep work for like my mental health around this event, like not necessarily anticipating any kind of outcome, but just because I have an anxiety disorder, and I like moved in with my girlfriend for days around it, and I did a news embargo like the day of, and like went kayaking the next day because it was 78 degrees Fahrenheit in Philadelphia.
Is that
And
hot?
I that's warm. Yeah, that's like 25 Celsius maybe.
Ooh,
Yeah, so in November. So yeah, so I went kayaking. It was lovely. Saw some birds.
gorgeous.
And so like I found out the results of the election by people asking me if I was okay. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess it went badly." Or went,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
based on
take a
my
leaf out
own
of
particular,
take a leaf out of
you know.
Pam's book, guys. Like, it's called self care. It's called
Just
managing your own anxiety. Like, come on. I feel like I've lots of people I've spoken to have said similar things to you, where they're like, I actually have been mentally preparing for this result,
oh
or
really?
like mentally
Wonderful.
preparing
Good.
for it generally, just like so
Yeah.
that I'm not so jarred because there's like
It's
scarred
a
from the
thing
first
that
time it
could
happened.
happen. Yeah, that's the thing is like I was like depressed for a month in 2016. Like a solid month I was just like eating breakfast for dinner for every day. Not the worst thing in the world, but like, you know,
Could be so much worse.
yeah, but yeah, it was just like at the end of November in 2016 I woke up and I was like I was depressed for a long time because that was a little depression episode we
Yeah,
kicked off
bro.
there. And I was just like I just don't want to do that again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I give the context that like, with you as well, like that like I'm fine. Like people are like, "How you doing?" Here, and especially I'm in Philadelphia. People are like, "I got my hair cut yesterday," and like, they're just like, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm so sorry for asking. It's just a habit." And I'm like, "Girl, I'm fine."
Good lord. Yeah, it's like it's hard. I think it's also
Especially well,
kind of
because I
like
don't know if you know that Philadelphia decided, like, because Pennsylvania is the only state that, like, that's what it felt like, the only state
ah,
that matters in the election. So I'm in
yeah. It's like the key swing state, is it?
yeah, it's like the only state that
Yeah.
matters apparently in the U.S. election, which is super annoying being here. So
Yeah. I guess
anyway,
everywhere
so I want
else
to give you
just
my
shouldn't vote.
context. What's your if you convince the Trump people that anyway, what's your context?
I would say that like it I think first of all, it's I just want to like caveat everything I'm about to say with like, what the fuck do I know? I don't live there, I'm not from there, you know. I think
Yeah, but that's actually
we
why I think it's great to have you talk about it because I'm like, what is the no, but like because it's like kind of yeah, it's like America is like we're so annoying. We're like the center of the
hey
universe, but
man,
also everyone
I'm
keeps
glad you
validating
said it
it.
first. Yeah, I know,
So
I know.
it's like why does everyone care so much what we're doing? But okay, like people
I
are like
think
sincerely care, and like okay, why do okay you
well, I
don't live
mean, I
here,
guess it's
but
like, you know, the leader of the global
how
superpower, it's like everyone's going to have
sure
to care a little bit, right? But I
yeah,
think
or I think like how
there's
goes the U.S. so goes everywhere else, in my opinion. So
yeah,
is kind of
or
a
I think
global
there's
trend thing.
like there's also like a fear in the UK of like there's two things I feel like we like to both like live in this like strange space of vicarious outrage, like we're just like, oh god, it's so awful for them over there, isn't it?
Yeah,
Luckily we're nothing like that,
Schadenfreude.
while also
You're not in
secretly
Europe
being
anymore,
yeah, while also secretly being like, but we are kind of like that, oh my god.
but you're definitely like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, have you seen Boris Johnson, you know? And I think like this is like the kind of the other part of it is like, just as you're like this year in the UK we had an election where we finally like got rid
Yeah,
of the right wing party, like the Tories, and like we have
it was
Labour again.
it was great and hilarious to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, but the thing about that is like, a is like Keir Starmer is pretty disappointing as a kind of like quote unquote left wing leader. I wouldn't even really call
Sure.
him. He's very centre left, and he doesn't really like stand for much. Whatever, he's whatever. But the thing about that is, it was like 14 years of like living through Tory hatred and austerity. So it was kind of like, if like Labour didn't win, it would have been like the like just final nail in the coffin of like the never ending like joke without a punchline of like the state of
Mm,
politics in the UK, right? Like, as in, like,
mm,
I don't understand why you people keep voting for this. But I think the reason why I'm like highlighting it is because like it felt like this country, like in the UK, it felt like we had like no other option really. Like even like Conservative Party members were like writing like fucking op-eds talking about why they were leaving the party, because they were just like, I don't know what we stand for anymore. If all you do is say who you hate and what you hate and like what you don't stand for, then what do we stand
Yeah.
for? I don't even know. So even
Yeah.
like people who I like fundamentally ideologically don't agree with were like, yeah, do you know what? Fuck this party, fuck it. And
Yeah.
everyone was like so sick of austerity and so sick of like just sick of it basically. So I think that's like a classic pendulum swing. Whereas I think in the US it's like a you just seem to be in this like never ending like reactionary doom loop of just like flipping back and forth between like and I think like these aren't my words and
Well,
this is just a
reactionary
theory.
doom loop is your words. It's your recent blog
No,
post.
no, wait. What I'm about to say? Yeah, that
Okay,
was
okay,
the
okay.
what I'm
I was
about to
like,
say
those
isn't
are your
my
words.
these those were literally my words. Those words that were
Yeah.
great and good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me.
Go subscribe, Substack. Yeah.
Everyone should subscribe. Yeah, I can plug it at the end. But
Yeah, yeah.
the some like really like kind of quite obvious, and I'm not sure what I think about this theories are like that people are talking about like on Blue Sky and stuff is just kind of like, oh yeah, everything felt good under Trump because he inherited like the good economy that Obama like had like instated, and everything felt bad under Biden because Trump
There
had just
was
been
a
in.
plague.
Also, did you hear about
Because
this thing?
there was a plague. Like
It was it was
oh, it
pretty
super
rough
sucked
for
living through a plague.
everyone.
F that guy. Like, okay.
And so I would say that like there's a kind of like you were like, oh, we had this guy for a bit and that sucked, and so we're going to have this guy for a bit. Oh wait, but that sucked. Let's go back to this other guy again. There's that. But also like the main point that I want to get to that I feel like hardly anyone is saying while they like wring their hands and wonder why the Democrats
Yeah.
didn't manage to convince everyone to not vote for Trump is like if you think about if I lived in the US and I was someone who could vote, I would go to the polls and vote for Kamala, but I wouldn't be like not because I'm like I'm so excited and inspired by her and I can't wait for her to enact her policies, like I can't wait for her to like I don't know continue genocide and whatever the fuck. Like I just don't want Trump to get in, right? I'm not voting for Kamala, I'm voting against Trump. And I think many people, including in the UK, couldn't get their head around that so many people voted for Trump because they were voting against Kamala Harris.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
just like
That.
it's driving me nuts. Like people aren't
Yes.
like you know how so badly you don't want like
The
a
same
raging
rules.
the
Yes.
same rules apply, but you know that way you've been voting all your life, like everyone does that. Like when you know that strategic thing you do where you're like, I just don't want them to get in. Everybody does that, including on the other side where you don't agree with
Yes.
them. And I think like something that's like, I mean, yeah, like something that really troubles me is when you don't. You have to think about like, look, I don't live there and I don't know what the day to day is like, but like clearly Trump was promising things that like people were receiving the idea of promise of things that like they felt that Kamala wasn't able to deliver on. Like she's saying like really abstract things like well, I don't know. I actually couldn't like even like glean any policy to be honest, but she's saying abstract things like let's not be like dicks to each other lol, and he's saying things like I'm going to make your groceries cheaper or something, right?
Yeah.
And like he's playing into like the general levels of like cultural anxiety that are coming from both sides. Like white men feel more threatened by you know like by like wokeness like these days they don't know like they're like unable to like fathom the idea of like people like calling them racist and calling them fascist I think is like and I think
Yeah.
essentially like people don't get that like people are less political than we think like I don't really think that like
That's
I think
I
I've heard
also
about this like huge
you're talking
uptick
about
in
people who are voting and I'm like there's some people who just don't.
and like, wasn't there a huge uptick in like who was running for president on like Monday last week, the day before the election and the day of the election? Because they're
I
like, oh
believe
wait,
it.
yeah, what am I
Oh
supposed to be doing
yeah.
again?
Which I'm
Yeah,
like,
this thing.
how are you not getting so many text messages? I got so many text
I
messages.
also yeah, I learned about that this time, and I was like, I can't believe that this is your life. You just receive like incessant text messages about like, please
Yes.
donate to our campaign.
Yes.
Anyway, I think like the kind of like overarching point is the kind of like you have to try and remember. I want to reiterate this because I think it's really important to remember that more people wanted they don't necessarily like Trump or think he's great, but they prefer him like a raging orange baseball glove to
Hmm.
a woman of color to be in power. And I think that is important. And that's like a key thing we're forgetting. There is like no amount of like PR acrobatics the Democrats could have done to make that not be true. Do you know what I mean? They
there's
so
I think
strongly
there's
didn't want.
also not, yeah, I mean, you can say like, oh, a woman of color, but like also the belief that plenty of people, according to their religious faith in this country, don't believe that a woman can hold power.
Is
So
that right?
that is at odds with electing a woman, period, which
Right.
happened in 2016. And then you tried to elect a black woman, or, a mixed race woman in 2024.
Yeah.
Um, like, of course I won't vote for her because she's a woman, is like an honest and real thing that probably happened. And maybe they just sat
Exactly.
out, maybe they didn't go vote for Trump, but it as a similar thing. I also think something that came to me, which in terms of like, yeah, these autopsies and things, is that among the other reasons why I find them annoying is that I don't think it's a great use of time to rationalize about irrational behavior.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
don't think that it's a great use of my time to rationalize about irrational behavior because, like, when I've had toxic or narcissistic bosses at work, like when I tried to rationalize their behavior, it just made me upset.
Yeah.
That person was fine. And the only
Yeah,
outcome
they're
was
fine.
that
Exactly. Yeah.
I was upset and trying to avoid bad things happening or things like that. And so it just doesn't seem like like I'm just like, so much energy is being burned. Like we could power
Yeah.
all the chat GPTs on democratic anxiety.
Oh my god. Yeah.
That's like, and I think about this because, and that's why I think it, besides bragging about getting a kayak last week, besides like giving the context that like I was, relaxed and thus like a bit more ready to receive news, slash like wondering like, did I disassociate a bit? Maybe a bit. I don't know. It has its purposes. But
Sometimes
like
you
when
gotta.
I get, you know, so many text messages from like my straight friends who are, like married, have children, like they're fine. Bruh, you're gonna be fine. But they're like, I'm
Yeah.
so worried, I'm so stressed out. Yeah, what does your worry do? What does your worry, like, it's back to, is that toxic thing, I using that word of like of centering yourself rather than like stepping back and being like, all right, sure, like I don't know. It's like maybe I've just also like, meditated a lot since, like 8 years have passed since the first time that Trump was elected. And so
Yeah.
done a lot more Buddhism. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
what is, there's a mantra as well, like outside of politics, that I've been applying the last few months for myself, which is, do I have enough information to worry about that? And so if
Mm.
something comes up and I start to have anxiety, I say, do I have enough information to worry about that? And the calling of the presidential election actually does not give me enough information to worry about. I got some information, but I mean, like, yeah,
I think that's fair
bruh,
enough, and I think
this
also like,
dude, like, he has
yeah.
a different vice president because he told his supporters to murder the other one. Like, bruh, I do not have enough information about
What?
like how this is gonna go. Yeah, like remember that? Why isn't my Vice President Mike Pence? Because he told his supporters to do things, and Mike Pence was like, I don't want to play in the sandbox with you anymore, guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd missed that one. I
yeah.
think
There's
also
so much,
with straight people
so
asking
much.
you if you're okay is quite a funny one. I think there is a way to do that where you're
I
not
don't.
centering yourself and you're just expressing allyship in a good way.
Is there Georgia?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Well, I hope so. I don't
Well,
know. Well, we're not here
maybe,
to give
but
advice to straight people. I don't fucking know. Like,
they're because I'm like, well, because I'm also imagining that maybe I got some of these text messages. I got like, just like hugs, which is, I mean, it's very sweet. Like, and thank you, friend, if you hear this, who sent me that. However, it is like, what, with what context are you? I think that people are getting like that. People are getting weird, and there's like that advice that they see, which is like, oh, check on your insert, threatened group people, and it's
really?
like,
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's like
yeah, people
specifically
people
because
get
you're
like,
gay, people are
yeah,
messaging you.
yeah. I think so. It's what it seems from the patterns I've seen, like where people are like, "Oh, just checking in," and it's like because I mean, to be fair, my rights are threatened, but my rights are not threatened as much as a trans person, since I'm cis. But like I am in that community and heavily involved in that community of the general queer
Yeah.
community and organizing. So like people know that I'm heavily involved. So
Yeah, it's weird though, isn't it? I guess it's like I mean, I listened to like before it like got shot to shit. Like the Reply All podcast did a really good episode on like white people
why
trying
did
to
it
help.
get was it did it have like a whole like podcast drama and like the leader and like is that Reply All?
Yeah, they were in
It's hard to track the
the
drama.
network. What was the name of the podcast network they were in? That was the problem. They were like doing Shruti Piminamneni was doing the episode on like Bon Appetit and how they had like
Their drama.
their drama with like co-opting like ethnic foods, like as in like white people cooking food that like they shouldn't be cooking, they don't know anything
Wow,
about,
look it's
and
yeah.
taking space away from like people of color. So she was covering that, and meanwhile being like, yeah, and I kind of feel like this kind of happens on the podcast that I literally work on, like in the episode, and there was like a 4-part series. They cut it before it got to the end, and like everyone like or the main host and she and maybe a couple of other people were like, actually, we're leaving this podcast, we hate it. And I think after that people were like, we have to boycott Reply All. But before that happened, they managed to get an episode in about Black Lives Matter and how people were in 2020, like white people were being like sending $5
Yes.
to black people.
Yeah. We can't have a governmental reparations program, but I guess we have Venmo.
Venmo, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we could we have a government, we could just do it. But I don't know, I met I had a friend who his partner gets reparations, like is a
Mm,
beneficiary of reparations in another country, and I'm like, oh, what great data on like you can just do it,
you
like
can just do it.
you can just
Yeah,
do it, like it's like, and it makes a lot of sense to do it and you can just do it,
it's
like
political
and
will
then
fully. Yeah.
it's yeah, like in the same way that I'm a like public healthcare is like there's a time when it didn't exist in other countries and you can in fact just do it. um
Maybe this is a good
which
time to
yeah,
talk about like how like Trump has announced that Elon Musk will be like the head of the new efficiency department, government efficiency department or something.
sure. I believe the acronym is doge. The abs-
Yeah.
the
Ugh.
absurdism is going to get so high.
Man,
If
he's
you was
like,
like
it's so gross how
I
much he loves memeing everything and he thinks it's hilarious. And it's like, it's actually not. It's really sad.
he's a real big loser.
Yeah, just
So
like
which is
massive.
like it's yeah, and it's like I don't know that I've always been cool. Like but just like someone trying so hard to be cool is the definition of a loser. That's you're trying so hard to not be a loser, circles back around, and then is a loser. And if anyone somehow like the thing about whoever listens to this podcast, like if you're somehow offended by that, like go and like put on a meditation timer, figure out if you might be a loser. It's okay. It is actually loserdom is a recoverable condition. This is really
Don't
like
worry. You
don't
can come back
worry.
from it. You can come back from it.
You
You can
can come back
literally
from it. You don't have to be a loser forever. You
go
can
to Thailand, take all the selfies, be super cringe, get it out of your
do
system,
it. Yeah. And then
come
you can
back, grow up.
yeah. Yeah. Put it on Instagram and then delete that account and start a new life. Um
Yeah.
and just it's
Remove your
available to you.
tattoos. Those services exist. You can get rid of them. Don't worry
You
about it.
can. There's lasers. Yeah. They're
You
like
have a
they're like
69 on your neck, you can get that straight off. Don't worry. I know a guy.
no I know. We can help you out. Also cover up tattoos are really cool. So
Yeah.
that's like a whole that's like I got my first like body tattoo earlier this year, and that's like part of my justification is like, well, if I don't like it, I can always like cover up as its own art form. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think that like, I mean, it's like interesting hearing you talk about the like the things where you're like, these are government services that could actually just exist. And I think like it's obviously like horrifically bone crushingly like predictable that obviously the first like new department we've heard announced was like the efficiency thing, government efficiency
But there's
department.
already a really good joke is like I guess they named two people to be head of it. And so why do
Yes,
you need
that's
to name two like
already pretty
you
inefficient.
you what?
Yeah,
Like
and
from the jump, it's almost whoa. It's almost like it has nothing to do with government efficiency. Blow
it's
some
almost
minds
as
here.
if
It's almost
it's
like
almost as if it's just patting each other's backs. The circle jerk
yeah.
of men in politics. I don't know even how to end that sentence, but I think you got the idea. I had you at
Yeah.
circle jerk. I think,
And power, which is I think how
yeah,
the relationship between the tech industry and especially social media specifically, really like
yeah, but
tech
I
broadly,
think,
but especially social media and social media industry and the attention economy and its relationship to politics is power.
yeah, and I think that like, well, something key here that I think we often like glaze over or maybe like miss just because like social media is so visible and like Elon Musk is a highly visible guy, and you're like, that feels somehow
And so
really
loud.
so loud. It feels really off that he's like going to be heading up like a government department about efficiency. It's like the the thing about governments perceiving like tech solutions as efficient is like just like a whole like
That's a whole other thing.
sinkhole of problems where it's like
Yeah.
you have like maybe like local like state government like officials who are like suffering from like decades of like austerity or and like so much
Mhm.
pressure from like their constituents and also like from above to like make numbers like go up and make things look
Out
better,
of
like how
nowhere.
can out of nowhere, and like how can
Yeah.
I provide more care for people who need it, like for the elderly, and
Right.
how can I
When you've
like
had a brain drain, when you've a lot of things that have
brain
happened
drain,
in this
exactly,
country.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like how can I like or like how can we just like literally just save money, like it's not even about like how can I like administer any kind of like public service better, it's just about like skimming as much as away as you can so you can like save money on like budgets that you know are going to be like dwindling for years to come, right? And I think that because of a lack of expertise and also just like a lack of time and a lack of like as you say like the brain drain, so yeah, a lack of expertise, it means that they like end up defaulting to like the shiny like magical tech solution, which is never usually more efficient, sometimes can be even be more expensive and cause like more harm than they may have. And I think like
And there's a lot of
through the
stories about
work,
this too.
exactly, and like through the
Yeah.
work we've been doing, we've like talked like to so many people who like talk about this stuff. Like this Friday, like the Computer Says Maybe podcast has like, sorry to plug another podcast on a podcast, but like we have an episode from Kevin De La Barne who like was the he did legal aid in Arkansas, and he was talking about how like they replaced nurses or like they replaced the mechanism of nurses deciding how many hours of care people with disabilities should receive with an algorithm, so that
Right.
they would like they would ask the patient all the questions, and then like, well, not the patient, the person who requires care, the just person,
Mm.
and then instead of just making a decision like with their own brains, the system changed such that they had to then just push a button and like get the system to decide. And obviously people's hours were massively reduced, and it left people in like really bad like undignified
Right.
conditions. So I think stuff like that, and it's like the idea there, like they like I mean I can't speak for like how like evil or like unfeeling like the government in Arkansas is, but like maybe they thought that that was going to work and it would be easier and cheaper and it would just be better, whereas like it just like wasn't, obviously. And I think that like something that we have to like think about in terms of like don't get like if we have the energy to not lose hope on in a Trump administration, is like you have to think about like the ways in which Elon Musk and his department and like similar types of people will continuously try to ensure that the government, which is authoritarian, can leverage like uh privately owned like technology systems to like make the lives of their citizens significantly worse in the name of efficiency. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like
There's
efficiency. What does
some
that mean? Efficiency for who? Like, do you know?
efficiency for who, I think is where the question is. Like in in the local news for Philadelphia, our transit system is at threat to have massive reductions in service and availability and raise prices at the same time next year. So in approximately 2 months. I had a weird thought come into my brain where I was like, could I write a letter to, president slash president elect and say like, hey, so here's the thing, and like we want people to be able to go to work, and so could you fund the transit systems, please? Thanks. So you love when people work, so
Yeah. It's
why don't
like,
you do it?
you know that thing that you'll keep making me do, return to the office? Like, help
What
me.
if
Help me,
you
help me,
help
help you.
me do it?
Help me do it. Yeah.
So many things.
It's like it's so annoying as an individual as well when you're like, okay, so the service is going down and the cost is going up, and you're like, where is the lever for change? Like, who do I engage? Like,
Well, and that's
obviously
that's
you
why it's a
can't.
big deal, is because it can
Exactly,
start
yeah.
the death spiral. And that's the death spiral, is like that's like what
Oh
a
no.
transit system, right? I mean, there used to be transit systems in many cities in this country, and then the tracks got ripped up by the car companies. So like there used to be trolleys in my hometown, but there aren't.
It's like trams.
Yeah, yeah. You might
Cool.
know them as trams.
Well, this is a big cultural exchange right now.
Wow,
My
truly.
mind is blown. I think yeah. So yeah, because like they defund it, and then they're just like, look, no one uses it. It's like yeah, because it's a
Yes.
pile of shit now, and so they're like they defund
Yes.
it even more, and then it gets defunded out of. This is like
Right.
women's
When
football in the
over
UK.
half of Philadelphians don't own a car. So,
Oh God. Yeah,
which
there is. A,
is not
this
the
is
solution. Of buying cars is not a solution.
exactly. This is like, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's kind of like if you have like people who can't afford XYZ, and then you take away the piece of infrastructure that was replacing that XYZ, and then you replace it with your own infrastructure, like I don't
Perhaps
know,
something you could rent and
like a
lease
Tesla. Yeah,
so
exactly.
that you can enter
A
a debt
software
cycle.
enabled Tesla. Exactly. Yeah, can't wait for that to get bricked on your driveway. I think yeah, it reminds me of women's football in the UK. They have
Soccer?
like yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you might know it as soccer.
soccer.
The one where you can't pick
Is
it
it
up.
okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, okay.
I think it's like it's like women's football has only just started to become like televised, and so you'll have like
Oh,
a men's local team and a women's team. So for instance, like the like a North London team, Arsenal, they're like a pretty popular team.
yeah.
The men's team they do pretty well in like the Premiership. The women's team also do pretty well because like they choose to fund them enough to like be able to buy good players. But historically they've like always taken that like only like put the women's games on like in like a stadium that is like basically outside of London, and no one who supports Arsenal would ever live near there.
Oh, and then
So
they're
then
like, look,
they're
no
like,
one
look, nobody
yeah.
comes. Yeah. And then they use that as an excuse to
Yeah.
never like do it at the Emirates. But luckily, because the Lionesses, the national team, the England team, women
Hmm.
have been doing really well in international competitions. They're basically celebrities now. So everyone who plays for Arsenal is basically a celebrity. And like, they're just like, oh, people actually want to come and see them. Amazing. Okay, fine. Well, yeah. So it's like, but it's that thing where it's like, yeah, you're making it bad on purpose so that nobody goes to it or
You're
nobody
making
engages
a
with it.
self-fulfilling
Exactly.
prophecy, and then
Exactly.
people don't use their little brains. So if people would use their little brains, they could. Now I remember I had a thing that it's like in terms of these autopsies, I have like maybe one more thing. Well, children, maybe like
Mm.
something that bothers me that I need to read more about or want to read more about. Have a book that is on the TBR somewhere in my house. Is that I don't like this like just as I just did it, but like the talking down or talking about people being unintelligent. Like, and I mean, I guess when I say people don't read, that's a proxy, that's often read as a proxy for intelligence. But I also do think that the labor movement in the United States was largely powered by illiterate people. And so I don't think that like many people involved in the labor movement, like if you were a
Like
person in
actually
like
illiterate? Like
yeah,
not can't
because
can't read?
in the early 90s not everyone could read.
Oh right.
Yeah, like
Sorry, I got you. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah, or like if you're a laborer from Eastern Europe, like you might not be able to read English, like,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
you don't
yeah,
have all these laws where everything has to be printed in multiple languages. Like it's just a straight up different time. So I mean, yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but
I
that
got you.
like this is brought up that when there's this like talking down to, especially talking down to rural people, like things that's like, well, I want to believe that people can have an interest in their own self-interest because it's happened before in the past
Mm,
that
absolutely.
labor organizing and like hyper local things, so I just I want to believe, but at the same time then I was just thinking like from my background of interactions with the rural sphere and just seeing people constantly act against their own interest.
Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, I mean, we have that here as well. Like, I feel like when we like, I don't know, when the Tories got in like the second time around and then like whatever, then it was just like a revolving door of like, pick your new prime minister, but you don't really get to pick like from the same party. It was kind of like I was so frustrated in 2015, like that, which is when we like this country
Well, you
re-elected.
all don't get to pick your prime minister, right? It's
No, no,
like
no.
picked by,
I
okay,
meant pick your prime minister, as in like the Conservative Party themselves internally were picking a new leader every far too often,
sure.
like for the last few years, because of just whatever the
They
fuck.
just
Like,
keep messing it up,
yeah, and they just
keep
had
doing
to
real
like
bad.
patching PR disaster after PR disaster.
Yeah.
But I think that like, yeah, like in 2015, I was like so frustrated and like sort of saying like you're just a turkey voting for Christmas and all this stuff. Like not
Chickens for
constructive.
Chick-fil-A. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not constructive rhetoric by any means, but like you're kind of when you're frustrated and you're like a bit younger, you're kind of just like, oh, you idiots. Like I think what we have to remember and what I'm like I feel like is like maybe it's similar in the US, maybe not. I think more so now our information environment has been like infected with like ludicrous slurry. I think we don't have, I don't know. It's like, where do you get your news? And everyone's got like multiple different places all the time. Or they have like one place, and that one place might be not even a publication, but one person, like an influencer
Yeah.
of some kind, who they just,
Hmm.
for whatever reason, they really like them and they respect them and they like follow them religiously.
Hmm.
And I think also there's like a kind of like, for the most part, like people who just don't, they don't care because they don't have to care, or they don't have the time to care, or they don't need to be, or they just see like news on the periphery alongside. Like I don't think there's any like there's no like people have been saying this a lot. There's no like left wing equivalent of like Joe Rogan. There's no left wing
That's a
equivalent of
big,
like,
big talking
yeah,
point, the autopsies. But like, do you
exactly.
want there to be?
Well, kind of. Well, I
I
mean, I'm only saying that because
like
I'm
those
like,
guys kind of suck,
yeah, they kind of
like a
suck, but
lot.
they convince people to. The thing is, it's like no one is there are like plenty of people who are like, or there's plenty of like discourse out there that isn't like partisan in any way, as in like I support the Republicans and that's why I'm saying this. People will just say like vaguely kind of right wing shit, right? And like
Hmm.
that will just be next to all the other stuff that you might consume as a like general user of the internet. And I think there's
Hmm.
no like more like left wing equivalent to that. And I think like Joe Rogan, who has like basically no interview skills and just sits there and lets people talk for ages and doesn't ever challenge them, is like not like, I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying like we need like someone who is more left leaning and at least has some opinions to, for lack of a better term, capture the hearts and minds of like young white men who currently are like, do you know what I mean? Like really
You know,
disenfranchised and like feel under threat and feel oppressed because like women are starting to get paid more at work and like, the
I want to.
ideological gap between genders has never been wider and all of this.
Sure, I do
Yeah.
want to. I want to call it back to though the
Sorry about that.
I'm not. I'm just. It's like I'm an observation, but it's not necessarily something I want to fix. But that you described the Reply All podcast, and and we talked about like various dramas therein, and fallouts, and what people in this category you're talking about, the left leaning, or like they often cancel themselves or get canceled by their own crowd. Like there's like the like someone will agree with 99 of the 100 things you say, but the one thing you say is like, no, no deal, I can't work with them anymore, I unsubscribe from that podcast and leave.
Mm.
There
Hmm.
is a wonderful, you can look it up on Wikipedia. I loved this installation art piece, Killjoy's Lesbian Haunted House, which, yep, didn't see that coming.
Kill no way.
uh, Really fantastic. He went around the country. I believe it might be Canadian origin, but in that installation, there's a graveyard, because you see this in queer community organizing, especially in lesbian and sapphic queer community organizing all the time, of things just dying. It's like, I organized a thing and then it didn't scratch the right ideological itch of some particular person, then they started an organizing movement around it, and then now there's no longer that thing that we kind of, like, a good number of people liked. And because it does suck to get yelled at and then you just stop. Like, I think that's all like reasonable. And it's also reasonable to have high expectations of people and to challenge them and like push them to be better. These are all reasonable things, and it is something that does not happen at all for the likes of Rogan or Andrew Tate. No like concerned citizens who like and genuinely like Joe Rogan are trying to get Joe Rogan to change his behavior, because they simply leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
simply leave, and not like, again, I don't think they should, because I think that that's, I talked about, energy. Where do you want to spend your one wild and precious life, and what is useful?
Mhm.
But it is an observation I wanted to share.
Yeah, I think that's like a valid observation, and it is something that is very frustrating to watch. If you're someone who is on the left and is trying to do any kind of like organizing or like engaging people, or hoping that we have
Yeah.
this one place to go to where we can return to for like high quality information, good content, and also, frankly, a sense of community.
Yeah, there's
And
a
I
sense of like
think,
identity and community, and yeah,
yeah, and
they
I
have
think
that.
that when you,
And we keep
if
tearing
you,
it down.
exactly, and I think if
Yeah.
you're, the thing is not to like overgeneralize, but if you're like, if you are like a very raging, like deep state loving conspiracy theorist, like Truth Social poster, you're going to be like very steeped in kind of like the I don't know, the various like conspiratorial ways that they like talk about, like, sorry, I don't know if I'm making sense. Is like the reason why like I think a lot of like stuff that Donald Trump did say
I'm
in
just waiting
his
to see where you're
like,
going. Yeah.
yeah, in his like debate with Kamala was just kind of like, what the hell are you talking about, bro? Was because I think he's probably like so stuck in his like niche
Well, he
communities of
doesn't,
like
he doesn't,
discussing.
like, he doesn't know that asylum has more than one meaning. Like, did
Yeah,
you
yeah,
read that
yeah,
one? Yeah, like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
he doesn't know words. He's probably illiterate.
yeah.
That's that's
And I think
I'm a fan of that conspiracy theory. I think it's hilarious.
I like that one. Let's keep pushing it. I think that
Yep.
like basically you don't get, because like people on the left are like they have actual ideology, like they tend to like actually believe in, I think, like the like values and like policies and beliefs that like we hold as like maybe like either like whether you're radically left or more left leaning person, is based in kind of like the promotion of like not only human rights but like human flourishing, and just like being like kind to people and making sure everyone
Bread
has
and
what they need. Yeah, exactly. Whereas like if you're on the right, you would maybe take a more like, I don't know, individualistic
it's
viewpoint and
individual.
be like,
But I
yeah.
mean, and yeah, and this is
Therefore
also,
you
then
don't,
that gets into the problem of having just two things.
yeah, but like I think what my point here is that you don't then like we like there's just so much infighting on the left because we're just like, no, you're like, you don't get, I don't know, you don't get that what you said was actually a racial slur and you should probably think about that, and then like, or that you don't get that we're constantly trying to like, you're right, like maybe we cancel each other too quickly. There's lots of like disagreements over like the right way to put together like your governance structure for your like
It's
co-living
also,
situation. I
yeah,
don't know, but
boring.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
exactly, it's
all,
so boring. Whereas on the right they
yeah.
don't like do that
They just
infighting because
don't
mostly like,
care.
I mean, like they don't care, and also like politically, frankly, they just want to get into power and they just mobilize around that, like
And
whatever.
yeah, when I used to do when I sorry, growing up in Kentucky, when I some of the times I would do advocacy, I have a memory of going to the state capitol in Frankfort, Kentucky, and going and visiting. I don't even remember what I was advocating. Maybe like anti-smoking, like I was like anti like tobacco. Yeah, especially I mean in Kentucky, like it matters, because it's a crop there. So was
Ah,
more.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
yeah.
so asking Kentucky to prioritize getting people to quit disease drugs, like, was a political thing because people own those farms and things. Anyway, but I remember going into it was like, imagine like the movie of like walking into a politician's office, literally two old men. I mean, I was a teenager, but they were old, but man spreading
Yeah.
cigars and drinking whiskey. It's completely true. And I was like 15 or 16.
Hmm.
And I was like, asking them, and they told me to my face, which I'm grateful to when people tell me the truth. And they said, no, no, no. Like I was, lobbying, and they're like, no, 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 this isn't how this works. Every 4 years, or whatever their term was, if they were like, whatever they were like, whenever we get elected, people are telling us that they want us to do whatever we want to do. And then that's their chance to change their minds and say they don't like what we're doing. But while we're in office, we do
Yeah,
whatever we
yeah,
want.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that was their legit perspective, just being like, oh honey, you don't know how this works.
That's really fucked up.
Is yeah, it's messed up. And grateful that they just told me. But that's what they think. And that's kind of a little bit what being conservative is like, you want to do a set it and forget it style government. Like, it's like, okay, I want things to be kind of a certain way, go do things, and I just don't want to think about it. And I
Yeah,
can
sure.
actually sympathize with that. I can sympathize with it because it's like there's a whole lot. And so you want to set it and forget it. You want the eggs to be cheaper.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
like, I honestly actually genuinely don't know what like conservatives think about when they are in power, besides like, how can I make sure I never lose this? Like,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
what
and then
that's what it
that's
feels
more
like,
theory
do you
of
know what I mean?
power, which I
Yeah,
applies to both. Applies to all because it's a theory of
definitely,
which that's yeah.
definitely.
Anyway, I think insert great segue here. What are some ways people can find you or interact with you on the internet? You mentioned, you
Yeah.
already plugged a podcast.
So I'm like the one, like I'm on the production team for the Computer Says Maybe podcast. You can
Is
listen to it, it's
that
weekly.
is that a reference to Willy Wonka?
Computer Says
No.
Maybe.
Yeah, what's it a reference to?
As
It's
far
not a
as I know
reference?
it, as far as I know, it's a reference to. Okay, actually, I'm probably gonna accidentally say something wrong, like culturally. But the way the phrase "computer says no," I only know from Little Britain. That really horrific, like
Oh, I
um,
have no idea what that is.
it's what do you call it? Clip show, not clip show. What
Reality
scene?
TV show?
Small
Oh,
scene. No, 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 no. Yeah, that's it. Why can't I remember that? Yeah, it was like a really,
there's a language barrier. It's okay.
yeah, it was
Um,
a really shit like sketch show from like a long time ago. There was this one sketch where like someone would say "computer says no" over and over again. If you ask for something, you're asking a
oh,
person, and they type in like dead faced, and they're like "computer says no," and then that was like the joke.
oh. Well,
And
maybe
so I
that's what
think it's
Willy
a play on
Wonka was
that.
referencing.
When did
So there's
when did
in the
Willy Wonka
movie
say?
Willy Wonka, the one with Gene Wilder,
Uh huh.
they have a scene where they ask a computer to tell them where the golden ticket is, and the computer says no, and the computer is like they're like, "Where's the golden ticket?" And
And
like
it's
the
like, no,
computer's
I
like, "I
don't want to
can't
tell you.
tell you," and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
"Why?" And it's like,
yeah.
because that would be cheating.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That was such a funny scene.
yes.
Yeah, it could
Computers
be a
with ethics,
reference. It
hilarious.
could. It's
Yeah,
so funny. Or
yeah.
computers being obstructive and then humans following suit. So yeah, I think it's a play on that, either from there
Okay.
or from who knows where. But yeah, Computer Says Maybe. You can find the podcast at saysmaybe.com/podcast. I also personally write a newsletter about like technology and stuff. You can find it at horrific-terrific.tech.
Uh-huh.
Subscribe
And
now.
that your personal website is very cute and I like it.
If you're a
It's fun to
millennial,
explore.
you'll love my personal website, georgiaacovou.com. Yeah, I can send you all the stuff to put in the show notes if you like.
Lovely. Yeah. Well, with that, I'll do the so thanks Thanks for listening. Until next time, we've got their social media on Instagram, Tech Cult Podcast. I made a Blue Sky account for it recently. So that's also Tech Cult Podcast. On Instagram might be techcult.podcast. There's also a Patreon because if you want to give me money, that's cool. I can send you stickers, and on YouTube at Tech Cult Podcast. And until next time, thank you so much for coming on, Georgia. This is so cool.
Thank you for having me. It was great. A lot of fun.